Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, or your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
Today's case is a makeshift glove. The brutal killing of Christa Hall. This case takes us to Orlando, Florida, just after Hurricane Irma swept through the state in September of 2017. The city was still recovering from its power outage in some neighborhoods, and streets were littered with debris, and people were trying to just resume their normal lives and figure out what they were going to do in the midst of tragedy. But for Christa Hall's 12-year-old daughter and her siblings, normal would never return. It was 11:30 a.m. on September 14th when a panicked 911 call came through. A young girl had just discovered her mother's lifeless body in their home. She told dispatch that she hadn't heard from her mom all morning. The car was still outside and something just honestly did not feel right. She knocked, no answer. She opened the door, walked in, and what she saw looked like red paint splattered across the floor. But it wasn't paint, it was actually blood. She followed the trail into her mother's bedroom. There, she found her mom, Christa Renee Hall, lying face down on the bed, cold, stiff, not moving. She tried to wake her, but nothing. That's when she called 911.
The dispatcher, trying to keep her calm, instructed her to get the other children and go outside immediately. The paramedics arrived shortly after, but there was literally nothing they could do. Christa was already gone. And it wasn't just a murder, it was a brutal killing. Detectives at the scene said that Christa had been attacked while she was sleeping, and there were no signs of a struggle, no signs that she even ever saw it coming. She had been beaten repeatedly in the back of her head with a heavy object. Her skull was caved in, and there was also an injury near her eye, but it wasn't clear which blow had actually ended her life. And the killer hadn't left any weapons behind. But what they did leave was unusual. It was very strange. Under Christa's body was a piece of plastic wrap, and it was wrapped in that like strands of duct tape. It looked like somebody was trying to make like a DIY glove to avoid like leaving their fingerprints. So it was like strands of duct tape in the size of fingers. Now, detectives immediately suspected that the killer wasn't a stranger. And the reason for this is because there was no signs of forced entry. The person either had a key or the door had been left unlocked. And that meant one thing. The person that killed Christa likely knew her. So detectives did what they always do in cases like this. They start with the people closest to the victim. And so first, they looked to Christa's mother. She told them that Christa had come by the night before, around 7:15. And she told police that Christa seemed happy, calm even. She seemed like everything was fine, except one thing. One thing was always wrong with Christa, and that was her marriage.
Christa was married to Tommy Hall, a retired Army veteran. He was 10 years older than her. They had one child together, and he had stepped into the role of stepfather for her older two kids. On paper, it seemed like the perfect match. And I just have to say, after experiencing this Diddy trial, I mean, anybody who is more than 10 years older than you, I'm looking at them sideways almost always. Now, that's neither here nor there, but keep that in mind as we go through this case. And I just had to say that because I'm always like, what?
And because we're inundated with this Diddy stuff, you can't help
and just naturally, I think that anyway, but it's really a major red flag. But behind closed doors, the marriage had unraveled. They were jealous of each other. Both had cheated. Tommy had developed a bad attitude, started smoking weed, and Christa wasn't about to just sit back. She started seeing other people too. It got so bad that they even discussed having an open marriage. Tommy eventually moved out of the house in June, but they stayed cordial for the kids. Christa was vibrant, a happy spirit, just naturally, the type of woman who brought joy to others, even when she was struggling. And let me say, that is a special kind of person. I love people who are like that. You know, you never know they're going through something. Definitely, those are the people you should check on, but they make life
Absolutely.
worth living
Absolutely.
for sure. Now,
Yes.
her dream was to have a big family, a peaceful home, and she worked hard to give her children the life they deserve. She fell in love young, had two kids by the time she was barely out of high school, and did everything she could to provide. When her first relationship ended, she didn't give up. She moved to Alabama, trying to start over. That's where she met Tommy. He was everything she thought she needed: mature, stable, loving. They got married, had a child, and later moved back to Orlando to be closer to family. But the picture perfect life, of course, didn't last.
At the end of 2017, Christa had a new man in her life. Now, his name was Ernie Reynolds. He was tall, quiet, respectful. Her kids weren't sure about him, and Tommy definitely wasn't sure about him. But Tommy admitted to the police when they pulled him in to talk to him that he didn't like the new guy around his children. And whenever a suspect shares with the police a truth that makes them necessarily look guilty, police are like, okay, this guy's being cooperative. He's being honest. Maybe he doesn't have anything to hide. He goes on to tell them that, Krista wasn't interested in being a wife anymore. He knew that, and she just wanted to be free. Still, he swore he had nothing to do with her death, despite the fact that that's not what he wanted. And he openly shared that with the police. He even told them that the last time he had seen her was before the hurricane even hit, when he came to get the kids. And he said that they were still on good terms. They were co-parenting. And he claimed that he didn't even have a key to her house. There was no way that he could have ever even got in. All this seemed to be solid. I think if you hear a potential suspect sharing hard truths like this that don't necessarily put him in the best light, I think most investigators are looking at him and saying, okay, like, let's just hurry up and clear this guy so we can get to the next guy. Well, as I began to go clear him, none of what he said checked out. See, cell phone data showed that Tommy was near Krista's home the morning of the murder. He claimed that he left his home at 5:40 a.m. to get to work by 6, but GPS data painted a different picture. Investigators are ready to rule out Tommy. He seems like he's giving them hard truths and sharing them things that doesn't necessarily paint him in the best light. So they begin to just go check off and corroborate what he's sharing with them. In the meantime, of course, they've got to continue to look at all the various potential suspects. They go to Ernie Reynolds. That's who Krista was actually dating at the time of her murder. And Ernie explained that he knew that they were just dating. He had recently hung out with her during the weekend of the hurricane. And they weren't as serious as Tommy was making them out to be. In fact, he was able to share with the police that he was nowhere near the crime scene at the time of the murder. So police take his information and they continue to explore. Ernie shared with investigators that he spent the weekend with Krista at her house with her best friend and her best friend's husband. Her best friend's husband was named Keely Talbot. They reach out to Keely because they want to see if maybe Keely has some information that they're not that lets them know about another guy that maybe she was dating, or just this is her best friend, right? Maybe she has some data. Maybe she's the person. They bring in Keely and she explains to the police something that completely blows this case wide open. Steph, she shares with the police that she was in a relationship with Krista. and they were exploring their bisexuality and that they had been together for the past 3 years, despite the fact that Keely was in a whole marriage with her husband.
So they had an open relationship. Did her husband know about it?
No, her husband did not know
Oh, okay,
about it.
so it was a secret, an
It was a
affair,
secret.
essentially.
And
Okay.
absolutely. And nobody would have even guessed, because even Ernie, the boyfriend, because in his mind, this was her friend and they were all hanging out with, it was like a couple, couples hang out here. Let's all get together and stay indoors while Hurricane Irma hits the area. No clue. Ernie had no clue, and Keely's husband had no clue. And they both considered leaving their husbands because Christa was not divorced to Tommy. They were both living separate lives. And they both considered leaving their husbands. But Christa, she just could not see herself being with a woman full out. Like, she wanted to continue to explore what it was to be with a man. For her, Keely was just a fling. It was just something to do. But she wanted to continue to date men. And Keely admitted that she didn't really like that, like that she was willing to leave her husband for Christa. But that's not what Christa wanted. She valued their friendship, and so she left it at that. Well, in police investigators' minds, they're like, okay, on one hand, she's telling us information that doesn't paint her in a bad light. I mean, she's telling us information that paints her in a bad light. She's being brutally honest about this, but so is Tommy. And yet both of them have a very obvious motive to kill Christa. So they're like, okay, we've got to explore whether or not this is Keely, is it Ernie, or is it Tommy? Well, they also, as they begin to check Tommy out, Steph, they realize that Tommy has a girlfriend. And so they're wondering, is it even Tommy's girlfriend who may just be jealous of Tommy's affection and desire toward Christa? And so it's just so much. So at this point, police have their hands full. They have multiple suspects to look into. And what do? They decide to pull cell phone data and really check out, are these people where they say they are?
Cell phone data showed Tommy was near Krista's home the morning of the murder. He claimed he left home at 5:40 a.m. to get to work by 6, but GPS data painted a different picture. It pinged him and his new girlfriend, Courtney Lawrence, at Krista's house that morning. So what are y'all doing there? But when detectives pressed him, his story changed. He said, oh, yeah, maybe I did go by the house, but only to check on the kids. He said he knocked, but there was no answer, went in and saw blood, and then just left. Didn't try to figure out what it was. None of my business. But let's be real. What kind of man finds his wife murdered in bed and his kids asleep down the hall and just leaves without calling? Detectives didn't believe it either. And then Tommy's story changed yet again. Tommy,
Now, Tommy. How
we
many
gotta
times
get
we
it.
gonna
We
change
gotta
the
get it
story?
together. If we're gonna tell a lie, you gotta stick with it. Now, this time, he pointed the finger at Courtney. He said she went inside while he waited outside. He heard arguing, then, quote, wham, wham, wham. I know y'all like those sound effects. He went to the door and saw Courtney running out. Then he found Krista's body. But of course, Courtney had a different story. She said Tommy told her to follow him to Krista's house. She parked a block away and she never went inside. She gave her DNA and phone records willingly, as if to say, hey, here, I'm innocent, baby. Stop me. Look
Run
at
these
Tommy.
results.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's not him.
And so when the DNA results came back, they confirmed everything.
Plastic wrap under Christa's body, you know, the ones that I was saying was made with duct tape, the makeshift like glove. Well, it was meant to prevent fingerprints, right? We know that. Well, it was left, and it was left under her body, and it had Tommy Hall's DNA all over it. Not Courtney's. No, Courtney's DNA was not found on the scene. You see, Tommy crafted the glove. He had taken a weapon from the house, and then he beaten his wife to death in her sleep. Then he left his own children, to find her the next morning. Now, he went to trial in February 2020, and the prosecution laid it all out. They laid out the jealousy, the motive, the phone data, the DNA. Because if you haven't picked up at this point, the cell phone data corroborated where Ernie Reynolds was. It corroborated where Keely Talbot was, and they were ruled out. And so it was the only two suspects left was Courtney and Tommy. And the only person's DNA that was found at the crime scene, it was Tommy. And his latest story that Steph shared with us was that he didn't even go in. So if you didn't go into her room and see her body there, how was your DNA on this makeshift glove that was not just laying in the bedroom on the bed? No, it was underneath Christa's body. Okay. So, you know, the prosecution, they laid all that out, and they laid it out really well. They told the jury that he wanted control. And when Christa moved on, he couldn't handle it. Specifically, when he went to pick up his children the weekend of the Hurricane Irma event, and he met Ernie Reynolds there. He didn't like the fact that Ernie was around his children and that he had access to his children. That enraged him. And then Tommy had the audacity to try to frame his girlfriend, but it was all a little too late. And the jury saw right through Tommy's lies. Tommy was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The most devastating part of this story is the violence. It's the fact that the children were the ones to discover their deceased mother. Their lives were shattered in a single morning. Their father took their mother from them, and for what? For jealousy? To prove a point? Christa Hall was trying to live, to love again, to find peace, but control disguised as love is still abuse. And when unchecked, it can turn lethal.
And that, my friends, is the story of Christa Hall.
We want to encourage everybody to tell us what you think about this particular case. Let us know. I also want to encourage you guys to tell us what you think. And the way you can do that is to do it on Spotify. You can also do it on Instagram and or Facebook, on all of our social media platforms. And make sure you go to YouTube if you want to see us and enjoy interactions and videos that we share as well. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black.